You think this is the first time? Wrong. This is the sixth time in 25 years. January 3rd, 2 a.m. Delta Force captures Venezuela's President Maduro. Hours later, Trump says, quote, "We will run Venezuela, control their oil, no democracy talk." The pattern: Iraq sold oil in euros, invaded. Libya proposed gold currency, bombed. Iran used non-dollar exchange, sanctioned. Venezuela joined China's UN system 30 days ago, captured. Every time a country touches the dollar in oil, consequences. But this time, China and Russia push back. UN calls it dangerous precedent. This isn't about freedom. It's a 50-year system called the Petrodollar in its final war. When it collapses, your savings get repriced. Here's what's happening. To understand why Venezuela's leader just got captured, you need to understand what happened in 1973. August 15th, 1971. President Nixon goes on television Sunday night and announces the United States is temporarily closing the gold window. What that means: foreign central banks can no longer exchange their dollars for gold at $35 per ounce. The Bretton Woods system, the foundation of global finance since World War II, is dead. And here's the problem Nixon just created. If the dollar isn't backed by gold anymore, why would the world keep using it? Why would Japan hold dollars? Why would Germany hold dollars? The answer: they wouldn't unless Nixon could create a new reason for the world to need dollars. Enter Henry Kissinger. 1973, Kissinger flies to Saudi Arabia, sits down with the Saudi royal family, and negotiates the most important financial agreement of the 20th century. The deal is simple. Saudi Arabia will sell its oil only in US dollars, not gold, not German marks, not Japanese yen, only dollars. In exchange, the United States provides military protection, weapons, political support. Saudi Arabia says yes, and overnight, the petrodollar is born. Here's why this matters. Every country on earth needs oil. Japan needs oil to run its factories. Germany needs oil for its cars. China needs oil for its economy. But now, to buy that oil, they can't use their own currency. They have to convert their currency into US dollars first. Japan wants Saudi oil. Convert yen to dollars. Germany wants oil. Convert marks to dollars. This creates artificial demand for the dollar. Not because the dollar is backed by gold, not because the US economy is fundamentally strong, but because oil, the most critical commodity on the planet, can only be bought with dollars. And here's the privilege this creates for the United States. The US can now run massive trade deficits, and it doesn't matter. The US can print more money than any other country. And it doesn't matter because the world needs dollars to buy oil. So no matter how many dollars the US prints, global demand absorbs it. 1970 US debt to GDP ratio, 35%. 2025, 98%. The debt nearly tripled as a percentage of the economy, but the dollar still the global reserve currency, still strong. Why the petrodollar? Let me make this concrete. China manufactures goods, sells them to America, gets paid in dollars. Now China has a pile of dollars. What does China do with those dollars? They can't just convert them to UN and forget about it because they need to buy oil. And oil is priced in dollars. So China keeps the dollars, holds them as reserves. The US gets to buy Chinese goods, pay in dollars it can print, and China has to hold those dollars because they need them for oil. This is the exorbitant privilege, the ability to print money and have the world absorb it because they have no choice. Now, here's the implicit threat in this system. This is a gentleman's agreement. Saudi Arabia agrees to sell oil in dollars. Other OPEC countries follow. The system works. But what happens if a country says no? What happens when Iraq in 2000 says, "I want to sell oil in euros"? What happens when Libya in 2009 says, "I want to create a gold-backed currency for African oil"? What happens when Venezuela in December 2025 joins a Chinese digital currency platform to sell oil in yuan? The answer: consequences. And those consequences follow a pattern that's repeated itself 6 times in 25 years. A pattern so consistent that once you see it, you can't unsee it. So what happens when a country decides it no longer wants to sell oil in dollars? Let's look at the evidence. If you're finding this pattern compelling, hit the like button so the algorithm pushes this to more people. And subscribe, because what's coming next? The breakdown of this system is something you need to see as it unfolds. 6 countries, 25 years, every single one touched the dollar's role in oil. Every single one faced military intervention or regime change. This is not theory, this is documented history. Let's go through them. First, Iraq. November 2000, Saddam Hussein announces Iraq will sell its oil in euros, not US dollars. His reasoning, and this is a direct quote, "The dollar is the currency of the enemy." Iraq switches oil sales euros. 2001-2002, the rhetoric starts. Weapons of mass destruction. Saddam is a threat. March 2003, the United States invades. 500,000 troops, shock and all. By June 2003, 3 months after the invasion, Iraq's oil sales are switched back to US dollars. First order of business, and here's the tell. They never found weapons of mass destruction, not one. The WMD rationale was false. But the oil trade back to dollars immediately. You think 500,000 deaths happened because of weapons that didn't exist or because of the euro? Second example, Libya. 2009, Muammar Gaddafi proposes the creation of a gold-backed currency called the gold dinar. The plan, use this gold dinar for all African oil trade, bypass the dollar entirely. Libya has 143.8 tons of gold in reserve to back this currency. 40 African nations are discussing joining this system. If this succeeds, the entire African continent's oil trade exits the dollar. 2011, civil unrest in Libya. NATO intervenes, bombs Tripoli. October 2011, Gaddafi is killed. The gold dinar project dies with him. And here's the part they don't talk about. Those 143.8 tons of gold gone, vanished. No one knows where it is. Hillary Clinton's emails released by WikiLeaks confirm the real reason. Quote, Gaddafi's gold-backed currency is a threat to the French franc and the US dollar. Not about human rights, not about democracy, about currency. Today, Libya is a failed state, but its oil back to dollars. Third, Iran. 2007, Iran opens the Iranian oils. This is an oil exchange that accepts euros, yen, rubles, anything except US dollars. The US response, immediate sanctions. Rhetoric about Iran's nuclear program intensifies. 2015, the Iran nuclear deal lifts some sanctions. What happens? Iran reduces its oil for UN trades. Tensions ease. 2018, Trump exits the nuclear deal. Sanctions return. Why? Because by 2025, Iran is selling significant oil to China in yuan, bypassing the dollar. The pattern is consistent. Every time Iran expands non-dollar oil trade, escalation follows. Fourth, Syria. 2009, Qatar proposes a natural gas pipeline through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and into Europe. This pipeline would use dollar-denominated transactions. Assad says no. Instead, he approves the Iran-Iraq-Syria pipeline, which would bypass the dollar system. 2011, the Syrian civil war begins. US-backed rebels fight Assad. Look at a map of the conflict zones. They line up exactly with the proposed pipeline route. The war continues today. The pipeline never built. But the message is clear. Challenge the petrodollar infrastructure. Face destabilization. Fifth, Cuba and Nicaragua. Both countries are currently discussing WAN-based oil trade with China. Both face heavy US sanctions, but neither has been invaded. Why? Because neither is a major oil producer. Lower stakes, but the pattern holds. Touch the dollar in oil, face consequences proportional to the threat. And sixth, Venezuela. Pre-2017, Venezuela sold 100% of its oil in US dollars. 2017 to 2020, Venezuela launches the pro-cryptocurrency, starts accepting Chinese yuan for oil sales. China becomes Venezuela's largest oil customer. The US response, sanctions, asset freezes, backing Juan Guaido in a failed coup attempt in 2019. December 2025, Venezuela joins mBridge, a Chinese digital currency platform designed specifically for cross-border oil trade without using dollars. January 3, 2026, exactly 30 days later, Delta Force captures President Maduro. Trump's statement, "We will run Venezuela. We will control their oil." No mention of democracy, just control. The pattern completes in real time. 6 countries. Iraq invaded, Libya bombed, Iran sanctioned continuously, Syria civil war, Venezuela leader captured, all within 25 years. All after challenging the dollar's role in oil. Coincidence? You tell me. But here's what makes Venezuela different. This time, China and Russia are pushing back. The UN Secretary General calls it a violation of international law because the old playbook, invade a country, install a new government, switch oil back to dollars, doesn't work when the country has backing from an $18 trillion economy. The system is cracking, and Venezuela is the stress test. So the question isn't whether the pattern exists. The pattern is undeniable. The question is what happens when the pattern can't execute anymore because the opposition is too strong. That's where we are right now. Let's talk current numbers. January 2026, 80% of global oil trade happens in US dollars. That sounds dominant until you see where it was. 2015, 95%. 15 percentage point drop in a decade. The dollar loses 2% share every year. 20% now trades in other currencies. 12% when, 5% euro, 3% other. This is gradual erosion, not sudden collapse. But the direction is clear. Saudi Arabia tells the real story. The country that created the petrodollar in 1973 is moving away from it. 2016, 100% oil sales in dollars. 2023, Saudi joins the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, China's economic bloc. 2024, Saudi joins mBridge, a digital currency platform. 2025, 22% of Saudi's oil to China settles in yuan. Why? China became Saudi's largest oil customer in 2023, surpassing America. When your biggest buyer wants to pay in yuan, you accept UAN. mBridge is the infrastructure making this possible. Not a proposal, not a plan, a working system. Launched October 2024, operational January 2025. 7 countries: China, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, Egypt. 12 more as observers. Purpose: enable oil trade without US dollars, without SWIFT. Here's how it works. Saudi sells oil to China. China pays in digital yuan through mBridge. Settlement instant. No correspondent banks, which means no US sanctions. No SWIFT, which means no US cutoff capability, no dollars anywhere. December 2025, 18 billion in oil traded through mBridge. Real volume, real system. Now compared to history, Iraq 2003, $30 billion economy, no allies, isolated. US invades. 3 months later, oil back to dollars. Libya 2011, 60 billion economy, weak African allies. NATO bombs, Gaddafi dies, oil back to dollars. But Venezuela 2026, 300 billion economy backed by China, $18 trillion economy backed by Russia, nuclear military power. You cannot invade Venezuela like Iraq, cannot bomb like Libya. The opposition is too strong, so the playbook changes. Old playbook, military invasion, regime change, oil to dollars. New playbook, hybrid warfare, capture leadership, face international backlash. US captures Maduro with Delta Force. China responds, release him or face economic consequences. Russia, unacceptable action. UN Secretary General, dangerous precedent, violation of law. For 50 years, petrodollar enforcement relied on military dominance. Doesn't work when the opposition controls global supply chains. Here's what happens next. Not sudden crash, gradual collapse. Mechanism: 2 to 3% more oil exits dollars yearly. Fed raises interest rates to maintain dollar demand. Problem: US debt $36 trillion. 5% rates equal $1.8 trillion annual interest. Government can't afford it, so Fed prints money to cover debt. Printing causes inflation. Inflation pushes more countries from dollars. It's a feedback loop. Timeline 2030 to 2035. Tipping point when under 50% oil trades in dollars. That's when reserve status ends. Maduro capture matters for 3 reasons. 1, first-time direct military force without proxy war. Delta Force on the ground, no pretense. 2, first-time president stated goal openly, run Venezuela, control their oil, no democracy rhetoric. 3, first-time major powers pushed back with credible threats. China's economic leverage now exceeds US ability to enforce petrodollar unilaterally. China trades primarily with over 120 countries. Opposing China costs more than leaving the dollar. 2 scenarios play out. Scenario A, US keeps Venezuela. China eventually backs down. Precedent holds. Prod dollar extends maybe a decade. Probability 30%. Scenario B, US forced to release Maduro under pressure. Emperor has no close. Other countries see enforcement failed. Dollarization accelerates. Probability 60%. We're watching the unstoppable force of China's economic rise Meet the immovable object of the 50-year petrodollar. One of them breaks. We're about to see which pattern established. 6 countries challenged the dollar in oil. 6F faced consequences. System eroding. China building alternative. But what does this mean for your money? Here's the chain reaction. Petrodollar weakens. Less dollar demand globally. Fed raises rates to make dollars attractive. Higher rates. Debt service costs explode. 36 trillion debt times 5%, 1.8 trillion yearly interest. Can't afford it. Fed prints money. Printing creates inflation. Inflation destroys your savings purchasing power. Petrodollar to your wallet. Direct line current state January 2026. Official inflation 3.2%. Real inflation, old calculation method 8 to 10%. You hold $100,000. 1 year later, purchasing power 92,000. Didn't spend anything but buy 8% less. If petrodollar loses reserve status completely, 15 to 25% annual inflation, not Weimar hyperinflation, but sustained high inflation, your 100,000 becomes 75 to 80,000 equivalent yearly. That's the threat. Asset classes respond differently. Bonds worst hit. Treasury bonds denominated in dollars, dollar drops. 20% bond loses 20% purchasing power. 10-year yield, 4.2% inflation, 3.2 real return, 1% positive future scenario yield, 6% inflation, 12% real return negative, 6%. Safe asset becomes guaranteed loss. Stocks mixed. International revenue companies like Coca-Cola, Apple benefit. Dollar weakens. Foreign earnings convert to more dollars. Domestic-only companies hurt. Inflation raises costs. Can't pass everything to customers. Margins compress. Your stock up 10% nominal, but inflation 12%. Real loss 2%. Nominal gains mislead. Real estate complicated. Tangible asset inflation hedge generally, but mortgage is expensive. Current 7% rates. Fed raises more 9 to 10% mortgages. Demand crashes. Prices stagnate despite inflation. Own property outright, good hedge, leveraged variable rate debt, trouble, commodities, best historical position, gold, 26.50 per ounce. Now currency crisis pushes 35 to 4,000, silver 32s, industrial plus monetary demand 60 to 80 potential. Oil world needs it regardless of price currency. Hard assets, traditional safe haven, crypto, wildcard, Bitcoin narrative, digital gold, fiat hedge, institutional adoption rising, risk, threatens dollar directly, government cracks down, won't allow competing currency during dollar crisis, high risk, high reward, small allocation only. 3 archetypes, which are you? Archetype 1, unprepared. 60% Americans, all assets, dollar-denominated savings, treasury bonds, domestic stocks, no international exposure, no hard assets outcome, lose 40 to 60% purchasing power, 5 to 10 years, 200,000 retirement buys, 80 to 120,000 equivalent. Today saved responsibly currency debased archetype 2, partially hedged 30%. Some stocks property, small gold position aware made moves not fully positioned outcome, lose 20 to 30% purchasing power. Better than one still hurts. Archetype 3, positioned 10%. International diversification, gold, silver, crypto, minimal dollar cash, debt-free or low fixed rate, saw 2008 coming positioned early. Outcome preserve or gain purchasing power, British pound precedent. Lost reserve status 1940s, 50s. 1945 pound bought $4. 1950, 2.88, 30% drop 1967, 2.44 savings in pounds lost 40% value 20 years. Same pattern coming for dollar. Timeline 2025 to 35, window closing, gradual erosion now. Reposition opportunity, too early. Opportunity cost. Maybe nothing happens. Too late, collapse, done. Assets repriced, stuck. Sweet spot, now pattern clear. No mainstream panic, smell smoke, don't wait for fire, elite moves matter, Ray Dalio. Cash is trash, own gold international assets. Bill Gates, largest U.S. farmland owner, tangible assets. Bezos, Zuckerberg selling billions, diversifying. Buffett, 325 billion cash waiting to deploy into hard assets. Right price, not fleeing yet, preparing. Gates buying farmland, Buffett waiting. What do they know? Like if this changed how you see your money, comment which archetype. 1, 2, or 3. Understanding where you are. First step to action. Let's bring this together. What have we established? 1973, petrodollar created gives us ability to print unlimited money because world needs dollars to buy oil. Any country challenges this system invaded or regime changed. 6 cases, 25 years. Iraq euros invaded Libya, gold dinar bombed, Iran non-dollar boars sanctioned, Syria pipeline civil war, Venezuela yuan platform leader captured January 3rd, pattern undeniable but now system faces real threat. China $18 trillion economy built. mBridge working digital currency platform, 7 countries using it, 18 billion monthly oil volume, Saudi Arabia. The country that created Petrodollar with us now accepting yuan for 22%. China sales, 80% oil still trades dollars, but was 95% decade ago. 2% annual decline, not sudden collapse, gradual erosion. And Venezuela capture shows something critical. US used direct military force. President admitted control oil, faced major power pushback. China demands release. UN condemns. Old enforcement playbook doesn't work. When opposition this strong, your money connects directly. Petrodollar weakens, Fed raises rates or prints money. Either way, inflation rises, your savings lose purchasing power. Current real inflation 8 to 10%. Future scenario if reserve status lost 15 to 25% annually. Bonds become guaranteed loss. Stocks mixed, need international revenue. Real estate complicated. Commodities, gold and silver, best historical hedge. You fit one of 3 archetypes. Unprepared all-dollar assets lose 40 to 60% purchasing power. Partially hedged lose 20 to 30. Positioned preserve wealth. British pound precedent shows this happens. 40% value lost over 20 years when reserve status ended. Core insight. This was never about democracy, terrorism, WMDs. Always about who controls the currency that buys oil. Control that currency, print money, maintain empire. We're in endgame now. Not tomorrow collapse, but 5 to 10-year window. 3 scenarios possible. Scenario A, 30% probability. Petrodollar extends. US intimidates successfully. Venezuela president works. China backs down. mBridge stalls, dollar remains. Reserve currency past 2030. Weaker but surviving your move, standard diversification sufficient scenario. B, 50% probability. Managed transition, petrodollar, gradually replaced by currency, basket dollar, plus UN plus euro, IMF special drawing rights, become actual trade unit, 10 to 15-year negotiated shift, dollar losses. Exorbitant privilege, doesn't collapse your move shift, international assets, hard assets, gradually scenario C, 20% probability. Chaotic collapse, major war, maybe Taiwan. Sanctions backfire, mBridge adoption accelerates, tipping point under 5 years. Dollar loses reserve status suddenly. High inflation 10 to 20% yearly. Asset repricing, social unrest, your move, urgent repositioning. Farmland, gold, foreign assets. Don't panic. Not sell everything tomorrow. Be aware. Reposition gradually. Timeline. Years, not months. Things to research. International diversification stocks with global revenue, hard assets, traditionally 5 to 10% portfolio allocation. Gold, silver, commodities, debt strategy, fixed rate debt, good in inflation, payback with cheaper dollars, skill development, currency, collapse skills, matter more than paper assets, community. Your network matters more than net worth when systems break. One thing minimum, don't hold 100% dollar cash, long-term 10 to 20% in assets preserving value regardless dollar. This matters beyond on money. Reserve currency transitions historically violent. British pound to US dollar, World War II, Roman currency collapse, Dark Ages. Currency equals power equals war when it shifts. Your kid's future. Next 20 years looks very different. Dollar dominance, America. You knew UN or basket dominance. Multipolar world, different rules. This should be mainstream conversation, but isn't mainstream media funded by system benefiting from petrodollar independent analysis? Only place finding this more people aware, better collective decisions. Final thought pattern. Clear 6 countries touched petrod, dollar, 6F faced consequences. Not conspiracy theory, documented history. January 3rd, 2026, Maduro captured, not isolated event. Latest iteration, 50-year system defending itself. Question isn't whether pattern exists. Pattern undeniable. Question is how long can system defend against $18 trillion Chinese economy? We don't know, but we know pattern. Pattern says prepare. When petrodollar finally falls, everything denominated in dollars. Your savings, bonds, salary gets repriced. Only question, Will you be positioned right side of that repricing? If you want to track this as it unfolds because Venezuela just beginning, subscribe now. Like if this opened your eyes to something you didn't see before. Comment which scenario you think happens A, B, or C, what you're doing to prepare. Share with friends and family. This conversation needs to be mainstream because unlike every previous reserve currency collapse, this time you have opportunity to see it coming. Don't waste it.